Joining us now is U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations to you. Congratulations to President Trump. Give us your reaction to all of this.
Well, let's give all the credit to President Trump. This would never have happened had he not been in the White House and had he not had the ability to engineer this deal. Certainly, he had good people like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner working out some of the details. But this is President Trump's incredible triumph. You know, in the Middle East, it's the strong horse that wins, and there's never been a stronger horse than President Trump. And all of us are celebrating today. We're teary-eyed with the joy that families who for 2 years have endured their loved ones being held hostage are going to be coming home soon. And this pin that I've worn on my lapel since I arrived, Maria, I can't wait to take it off and get rid of it, because the moment the hostages are all home, I get rid of this pin, and I never, ever want to see it again.
Well, it's just incredible, Ambassador. Approximately 20 living hostages are what we expect here. They remain from the 250 that were kidnapped on October 7th when Hamas launched this assault. What are you looking for to ensure that they keep to the plans and, in fact, do disarm? Do you believe Hamas will, in fact, disarm and release all of those hostages?
Well, I do, simply because President Trump has told them they have to. I think they get the message. They saw what he did in Iran. They've seen what he's done across the world. They understand that he is a person, he means what he says, and he says what he means. And he's told them there's two things. All the hostages have to come out, and they have to disarm. They don't have a future in Gaza. He's been clear, and he's been consistent. And if they don't believe him by now, they never will. But I think that with the help of the Egyptians, the Turks, and the Qataris, everyone has been at the table trying to say to Hamas, this is it. You don't have another chance. And don't mess with President Trump, because he's not playing with you. And I think they finally have taken it to heart. It's a huge, wonderful, deep day of relief here in Israel after 2 years of a living hell for the people of this small but very significant country.
Absolutely. Thank God that we are actually seeing this materialize. Ambassador, talk to us about how the map will be different, because, of course, Israel has agreed that it will withdraw its troops in the Gaza Strip to this agreed-upon area. What do you want to say about that area?
Israel has never wanted to go back into Gaza and to take it under their control. They want a security parameter. That's what they're going to insist upon. But they don't want to go back into Gaza. You know, they left it in 2005. They uprooted the Jewish people who were there and said to the Palestinians, it's all yours. You can have it. You have the whole thing, 100% of it. That was the Palestinian state that they had. 2 years after they got it all, they voted Hamas in to run it, and the rest is history. They built an underground tunnel system bigger than the London Underground. All of Gaza Strip is less than the size of Las Vegas, Nevada, and yet they ruled it with an iron hand. They spent most of the billions of dollars of money that poured into Gaza to give them prosperity. They instead built rockets and missiles and mechanisms to kill Jewish people across the line, which they then successfully did on October the 7th. So I don't know of anybody in the world except idiots who would do anything other than celebrate the demise of Hamas in Gaza and celebrate a new future for the people who live there, hopefully one that will give them a much different perspective ahead than they ever would have had with Hamas still in power.
Ambassador, what are you expecting in terms of securing the region once, in fact, we do see the hostages released and we see that Hamas agrees to disarm? Will there be troops watching, security on the ground? What will feel different on the other side of this?
There will certainly be military presence in Gaza. It will not be U.S. military, from what I understand. I don't think we have any plans to send our troops in there. But there will be an international force of troops to police the area, to begin to build up some level of security. And on the external perimeter, Israel will have control so that nobody is going to be able to overrun their borders and do what they did on October the 7th. That's never going to happen again. But I think something bigger is taking place. President Trump has set up for an incredible realignment of the Middle East, Maria, that we've never seen or even imagined before. Look for the Abraham Accords to expand exponentially. You could see Syria and Lebanon be some of the first partners in the next wave of Abraham Accords. These are things that if you'd have said this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people would have laughed in your face. Today, because the strong horse, President Trump, is on the saddle, we have a chance for an unprecedented level of realignment and genuine, long-lasting peace in the Middle East.
Unbelievable, really, truly. But what about Iran? I mean, we came close to seeing the Saudis actually join the Abraham Accords as well, but then Iran tried to bust that up. Are you worried about Iranian-backed groups, the Houthis, trying to intersect and blow this up?
We always have to be concerned about the splinter groups that are sponsored by, supported by, and philosophically led by Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood. But the other side of that is they may want to lay low for a while. It may not be in their best interest to rise up, because it's not just President Trump, but his leadership has brought a unity in the Arab League that we've not seen. And I think there's a patience has just simply worn out with these people that want to constantly bring division, war, bloodshed, and mayhem to a place that ought to, for the first time in hundreds, if not thousands of years, would be able to advance toward both peace and a prosperity for the people. That's what Israel has experienced. It's constantly threatened. Wouldn't it be nice to see it happen in the rest of the Middle East and ultimately the world?
Absolutely. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that he's going to be holding a vote with his government to ratify this deal today. You've got a statement from Hamas thanking President Trump. But in that statement, they hinted at major details yet to be worked out. What are the details that are yet to be worked out, and what can you tell us in terms of the vote in Israel?
I don't think there's any doubt but that the prime minister will get the vote that approves this deal for Israel. How would they not? They're going to get the hostages back, which is the #1 priority they've had for 2 years. So I don't see that being an issue. As far as what Hamas wants, there may be some tweaking on some of the areas of where those withdrawal lines will be. But I know that Israel is not going to withdraw in order to allow Hamas to reconstitute. They're going to have to live under the president's very clear directive. They have to disarm. They have to plan on exile. They're not going to have a future in Gaza any more than the Nazis had a future in Germany after World War II.
And what about the list of Palestinian prisoners to be released in exchange for the rest of the hostages? What are you expecting? I mean, it's incredible the number of Palestinian prisoners that Israel will be forced to release as well.
No question that's the heartburn, and it will be for a lot of Israelis, realizing that some of the worst will end up getting out of prison where they really belong. But that's the price that will be paid to get the hostages out, which shows the difference. Israel is willing to do extraordinary things to save their innocent civilians. Hamas, they're willing to do evil things, even kill their own civilians, just in order to free terrorists. It's quite the contrast, and the whole world, I hope, will see it. And I hope the people that have been screaming in the streets of America, screaming out pro-Hamas nonsense and from the river to the sea, I hope they watch this carefully and they pick a new side than the side they've been marching for.
Ambassador, you're coming to us right now live from Israel. Can you give us a sense of what the backdrop feels like to you? People out in the street, how are you assessing the backdrop today?
Elation, excitement, gratitude toward President Trump and toward Prime Minister Netanyahu. But everyone here clearly feels a sigh of relief, the likes of which I have not seen. It hasn't been here in 2 years. And I think the other thing you're going to feel is this real sense of which Israelis understand that their resilience, their resolve, their patience has finally paid off, and their people are going to come home. I wish all of them would have come home alive. I wish there was never 1,200 that were massacred by the savages of Hamas. But today there is deep gratitude, and my phone has blown up with messages with people just saying, please tell President Trump we love him, we thank him. It wouldn't have happened without him. And to all of those things, I say amen and amen.
Yes, absolutely. Amen. And real quick before you go, interesting to note that President Trump was able to get this first phase of a peace deal across without the promise of statehood for the Palestinians.
Yeah, I don't think that was going to be on the table because there's a whole lot of cultural things that have to happen, reforms, before that's even going to be discussed. But
Sure.
what had to happen was the hostages had to come home, and Hamas has to decide they don't have a future in Gaza. Those were the conditions President Trump put forth. He never wavered from them. That's what makes it so effective. He never, ever blinked. And because of that, that's where we are today.
That is wonderful. Ambassador, good to see you. Stay safe, and thank you so much for your leadership. Ambassador Mike Huckabee this morning in Tel Aviv. We'll be right back.